a language. Hallo Freunde, willkommen zurück zu .NET API Review. We have once again made it so that there's a scroll bar, and once again I've given us an agenda that doesn't feel ambitious, but you may notice that there aren't a lot of people in the room right now, and we'll see how far we can get before we lose quorum. First up, let's talk about runtime feature.is single threaded. This is .NET Runtime 77541. Look at that, a 5-digit issue. Pavel.
Hello, everybody. So this feature is useful on .NET running in the browser, represented, for example, as a Blazor product. And in that environment, we are running on single thread. We are running in the web page that is single threaded. And that situation has significant consequences for the any software running there, including the virtual machine itself. The most interesting impact is about being able to run background jobs, and all the background tasks and jobs that you want to run, you have to run them scheduled as on the top level event loop as any other code. And so you're typically rewriting thread-based background loops into async or timer based loops that keep scheduling itself. And as well, in single-threaded operating system, let's say, you cannot really block on any semaphores, mutexes, wait objects, because there is nobody else to await you when it's done, because nothing would be done if you, the only thread, are blocking. So that's the situation that this flag is trying to express. It is not trying to express the optimization opportunities for memory model synchronization of state. Although if you only have single thread, you can save yourself some operations and cycles because maybe you are safer. But typically, .NET code is written in a multi-platform way, and your browser application is typically just one of the environments in which your application runs. And so you keep locking your logs and protecting your memory with barriers and so on as usual, because you want the consistency across other platforms. But being able to wait and being able to process background jobs, this is forced on you. You have to react to that fact. And so we are proposing this flag that would be set in a browser, in single-threaded browser, so that your code can decide to use different implementation strategy. As well, we will use the same flag inside of the base class libraries to trim extra functionality that is not used in single-threaded browser, or to throw platform not supported exception for waiting operations. That's all I have. Questions?
I know WASM at some point supported the background worker, but then there were issues with that. Is that gone?
So we still have flags that you can turn on the mono WebAssembly browser target that will make it multi-threaded, but that's not production ready. We didn't put it into production for two reasons. For stability of the code, we still have bugs, essentially. And the other reason is that we didn't have bandwidth to adopt multi-threaded approach in the Blazor product. And so it's not mature enough. And eventually this is upvoted, like highly upvoted. Multi-threading in the browser is highly upvoted feature by the community. So we will eventually return back to it. But right now, the only production ready .NET in the browser is single-threaded.
And how does this differ from environment.processor_count equals 1?
In the browser, there is no interruption. I would say there are no signals. You cannot get preempted.
Right. It's preemption, right? Like that's the main thing.
Yeah.
But that's more just that's not a restriction of WASM or a restriction of the browser. That is a restriction of our own code gen. There's nothing preventing us from enabling preemption like MS-DOS style preemption, where we automatically insert interruption points into our code process and allow threading emulation or similar.
I mean, I think you're right, but I mean, it's still good to know that you're in a mode there is no preemption, right? Like,
so you would have to have instrumentation of probably the IR code that would stop the virtual machine and return to the browser event loop.
and implement a scheduler yourself.
Right. It's effectively manual continuations for all code.
And so this is actually implemented by the mscript10, the LLVM toolchain that we use. But it makes the .NET virtual machine so slow that it's unusable. So we are not going to do that.
Right. And I understand that we might not want to, but my question was more just like, is this something where is single threaded is the correct term here versus the concept of having a single processor count and effectively saying we don't support preemption instead, or something similar that better relays to users what we're trying to guarantee to them. Because the concept of is single threaded, at least to me, means something very different from what it sounds like we're trying to relay for JavaScript here, particularly when people think about things like there's, we only had single core computers for decades, and there was no problem with multitasking, multiprocessing. The entire premise of WinForms is you have a single thread, and everything that happens on it is because you're scheduling an event to the event loop to get it to happen, and you don't actually bring in the other threads to do work. So that's effectively a single threaded ecosystem. Half of COM is STA threaded, and none of the things like blocking waits or anything are what we're restricting in those environments, even though those are conceptually single threaded contexts.
Yeah, I don't have strong opinion about the name of this field. So if you guys decide this is different name, I'm fine.
I mean, you keep returning to the notion that it's saying that our runtime, because I think somebody can still call in and spin up a background worker, because I feel like we tried that with crypto at one point, that our runtime is not built to expect preemption. And so I wonder if instead of single threaded, we should name it is preemptible or something. And then it becomes false on WASM.
Well, I the preemptible solution somebody would have to implement that, and we are very far from
Right.
that.
So I'm just saying, invert invert the parity. So instead of on WASM is single threaded is true, on WASM is preemptible is false. Every other runtime would say it's true.
If you feel this is better name, then okay.
I think I like the name a little bit better personally because it also brings in the concept of you can be multi-threaded but not preemptible. And it's entirely possible that WebAssembly gets multi-threading in the future, but it does not guarantee preemption in that case. It may still require each thread to be effectively event loop driven. And so I think it's a little bit more powerful of a mechanism. And then if you care about is it single threaded or is there only one processor available, you can check that with processor count.
I mean, threads are you get threads on cores, so it's I don't know that the processor count tells you, but
yeah. I also don't know if it would actually be like you have any different guarantees if you had multiple event loops on multiple threads versus just preemptible thread. Like, because in the end, like, code could interweave however you imagine effectively as far as accessing data. But I still like the name, like, is preemptible.
Yeah, the problem that I have with is single threaded is that sounds like it's describing the status of the current process, even though it's living on runtime feature. Like, what we're saying is, does the runtime support a concept at all? And so preemptible is a concept, it does or doesn't support it. If it's about, supports multi-threading, then it would be supports multi-threading. And so whether or not you only have one thread running, it's does the runtime support it? I'm aware that none of our runtimes that support multi-threading ever are in a single thread mode, but that's not a thing users actually know.
So yeah, there was other names suggested if you scroll a little bit down, and one of them was that it, like, the original name, it was something about is thread start supported. Was the original name on this issue when it was created in 2022. So does that sound better? Because I'm not very comfortable with talking about preemptive or not.
I worry about thread start specifically because you have more than just threads that people consider like tasks. Like the runtime may not support a user creating threads, but the runtime itself may create threads to support tasks in its own thread pool. You find this on some game consoles, for example, where you are restricted to a specific number of threads.
Mm-hmm. I see.
I see Jan joined us. Jan, how would you feel if we call this MIWASM runtime feature bit is preemptible?
It's fine with me. Like, the whole name would be is preemptible.
Yeah, so we'd invert the polarity. WASM would say false, everybody else would say true, but it sounds like the thing that you really want to test for, the idea that we keep coming back to is preemption. It's not can user code start a thread? It's not is there a second thread running? It's does your code need to take preemption into account?
I will say multiple threads being non-preemptible doesn't make any sense though. Like, if you look at the sample code, like if you scroll down where it's like, oh, like if this bool is what is in WASM mode, whatever we call it, we don't take the lock. Like, doesn't matter if multiple threads are running and they're not preemptible. Like, the fact that they could both access the data at the same time is the problem. Like, whether or not they're quote unquote preemptible. Like, whether or not they can be interrupted. Like, the fact that there can just be basically two logical threads going on at once, whether or not they correspond to, you know, physical cores. That's what you care about.
You know, like to me, the is preemptible. You know, it's like too abstract, and you know, like when you do async properly, you are also preempting things, and that works fine in WASM. So, you know, I think this should probably communicate something like more low level. Probably it should have like thread in the name. So that's what really doesn't work. I think preemption in general is fine on WASM as long as you do it with using the proper pattern.
Is async really preemptive, or is it cooperative multitasking?
Async is more, it's not parallel, and it's not strictly even concurrency. Async is async, which is you have, it generally relies on signals and effectively continuation. So you're actually scheduling something back into a queue. The queue is processed. It's async really doesn't work any differently than WinForm's event loops do. It's very much cooperative multitasking instead of preemptive multitasking.
Yeah, because it requires you to explicitly yield.
Mhm.
I will go back to my previous point though about like whether or not async is preemptive. I think it's not what we're interested in. Looking at the API usage, if you scroll down a little, we're trying to decide like whether or not we should take a lock. And like to Tanner's scenario where like WASM has multiple thread support but no preemption, you still need the lock because two threads can access the data at the same time. So that's what you really care about, is like whether two logical threads can access the data.
I don't think that's correct.
The
Like,
example with the log is slightly misleading here. It's not,
Okay.
this is not the core use case, but I'm interested to explore the event loop idea. So do you need to yield? Yes. Does it help?
Yeah, so spin weight's the core use case. And the other thing, like we're probably going to just take the lock anyway because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you would take the
Yeah.
lock, and then the lock would be implemented by the runtime on WASM to say, oh, I'm single threaded, therefore I do not need a barrier or something else, and it becomes an optimization point in the concurrency primitive.
Yes.
Makes sense.
And that gets, so the whole like concurrency and asynchrony and parallelism are three related but different concepts, because you can be concurrent, meaning you can have two things able to access data quote unquote at the same time, but not parallel, where parallel means that two things are executing literally at the same time. And
Right, but
so
even from-
concurrency emulates parallelism via preemption on most OS.
Right. But like even in the like, oh, internally, like, you know, Mutex or monitor or whatever, like looks at this bool, like if you're worried about data races, whether or not you have preemptive multitasking on a single thread is completely irrelevant to you. It's whether two logical threads can access the data at the same time.
Right, which matters if there's actual parallelism or if there is no parallelism but there is preemption.
Right, but you need to know like both. But yeah.
Yeah. So my concern with the name is that it sounds like it's a point in time state thing, because it's not true that you shouldn't take a lock because you are single threaded. It's you don't need to take a lock because there will never be another thread. So it's more about, you know, is threading supported, I guess.
Or supports multi-threading.
Yeah.
I think that's a word you used earlier that I liked.
Yeah, I think supports multi-threading or is multi-threaded. It kind of sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me as well.
Yeah,
You know,
I feel like support is the better word, because the just is multi-threaded it sounds like, oh, keep checking to see when the other threads die. It's like, no. It's about, does the concept exist on this particular execution?
So it would be to match the existing API name. It would be is multi-threading supported, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know why we put the supported on the end. Probably because we wanted to just put the two dynamic codes together. What else do we have in there?
And then if you go back to the alternative designs, does multi-threading add anything beyond threading? I think the alternative proposal is threading supported.
There's always a thread, I think. And so multi-threading makes it clear that it's supporting more than one thread.
So
Yeah.
when it is false, it's guarantees the process will have just one thread.
Yes, that's how WASM works.
That's how WASM works without web workers.
And
But
create
that's how
create
our
thread
contract expands.
and this stuff will fail during that time, right?
Yes, if you try to create new thread, it will throw platform not supported exception. And this flag will be used to throw that exception.
Excellent.
Yeah, but you know, while is thread create supported was one of the proposed alternative names, that isn't exactly the right answer either, because if we support exactly one background thread and a main thread, then multi-threading concerns would be present, but your ability to create a custom thread would not be. So
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, so most of the things that are on runtime features are just like the presence of this field tells the compiler it's there. The is dynamic code supported and compiled seem to be the only thing we put on this class that are checked at runtime. And then we have the is supported arbitrary string. So yeah, is multi-threading supported?
Should the name have the word process on it? Multi-thread
No.
process? No? Why?
Like in the browser, there are no processes really. There is always just one process, and that's actually emulated. So
Okay. So is multi-thread supported looks good to me at least.
Same.
Does anybody know how we spell multi-threading? The question is it the second T capital or not?
No, I would go back to threading before you capitalize this second.
I just want us to be consistent.
Let's
see.
We've got no public instances of the word that I see. All but one usage internally looks to be one word, so threaded lower.
Yes, I'm seeing
I
Windows
don't
Form.
see this building.
Windows Form have multi-threaded save call scope, and it uses the T as lowercase. So
Yeah, these are the only ones that are showing up in the catalog. They're always a capital T, but none of them are system. So
actually, WPF have another property. It's called multi-threaded collection change not supported. And in this property name, they are using T as uppercase. So
That's internal though, right? That is very internal.
yeah, I was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I see no.
Wikipedia uses multi-threading. The OS Dev Wiki uses multi-threading, one word, so lowercase t. Looks like the Intel Architecture Manual uses one word.
All right.
I'm definitely in favor of one word personally too.
Yep. Both 1 and 2 look wrong at this point, so I just wanted to make sure we were consistent.
Yeah.
All right, we were on this one.
What's the name for that when you look at a word too long and it looks like it's wrong?
I
You
don't
know what I'm
remember.
talking about? Yeah. Happens a lot in API review though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that in like 3rd grade or maybe earlier, I noticed that the word together is just spelled to get her. And like, I've literally always read the word as that sense. And you're all welcome. It's just like, thanks, brain.
Wordnesia. Wordnesia. That's what Google says anyways.
One last question here is, I'm seeing Jan has this comment about this feature flag should be only ever respected on WAS. Do we expect like this in the future can be respected in other scenarios?
Why
Yeah,
would
it's
we want single-threaded elsewhere?
I'm just asking because like if it is really respected for WASM only, should the name have WASM on it?
in theory, you can imagine people building stuff for like, small devices that is single core hardware, but they have no OS. It would kind of, the execution environment for that would very much like WASM. I don't expect that we would ever ship a platform like that, but it's somebody in the community might.
So Buzzy is another operating system that is currently multi-threaded, but that's as well WASM as an instruction set, but it doesn't have to be necessarily.
Yeah, I'm just asking because like if it is really specific to WASM, I mean like maybe it would be helpful if the name have such name so consumers can understand like, yeah, I need to use this for this scenario. But having like very generic names, multi-threaded supported, maybe can be confusing for other users.
I think the general point is that we're only planning on ever shipping our versions of .NET Runtime where this is false for WASM, but the concept applies to any system where multi-threading is not supported, not just WASM. And like Jan said, there's IoT devices, there are people doing custom runtimes in other scenarios where they might implement a custom version of the runtime where they would want it to be false on those platforms as well. And the same logic and the same optimizations and everything else would kick in there. So it's not really WASM specific, even if we're only using it for WASM ourselves.
Yeah, maybe the doc can clarify that. I mean, like, is multi-threaded supported is okay, and the doc can say like, WASM is one example of that.
Okay, and I renamed the feature switch definition attribute value at the same time. I assume our feature switch trimming stuff doesn't care if we have a normally true versus normally false value.
It works both ways.
Yep, just making sure. All right. Chat has had some proposing that we capitalize the second T. I think most of the people in the call want it to be lowercase, and again, The current point in time for the article on Wikipedia is it's a lowercase t, which that seems like a good enough to me.
Yep.
Can we get like
Mhm.
OED? Does it have it?
AMD, ARM, and Intel all use lowercase t in their architecture manuals.
The Oxford English Dictionary has multi-threading as a noun, so it is a single word, according to some snooty Brits. All right.
Sounds good.
Cool. Tanner, are
Thank
you
you.
content to continue to yield so we can get Pavel's 2 issues back to back?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So next up, JavaScript marshalling support for float arrays, span a float, and array segment to float. 123706.
So I'll introduce this one as well. This is API intended for the Roslyn code generator. It is extension of API that was created for JavaScript Interop a few years ago. When I introduced it, I limited scope of work and excluded this data type from the implementation. Now the community came and demanded it and then contributed the implementation. So here we are. The usefulness of this scenario is when you're talking to your GPU, you are transferring large buffers of floats from your address space of the WebAssembly into buffers on the GPU. And to do that without too many copies is beneficial for the performance. There is a parallel existing API for double, so marshalling double buffers and double arrays that is there. This API only mimics the same pattern. It's essentially technical API. The usage is in configuring JS import and JS export attributes so that they generate the code that uses those APIs using Roslyn code generator. And so those APIs, user-facing APIs, if you scroll a little bit down, it doesn't change, doesn't need to change because it will work as it is.
Does
Any
JavaScript
questions?
have a notion of float 32?
Nope. Right?
WASM
It's just
does,
double.
though.
Oh, WASM does.
So there are arrays of bytes that for which you can create a view shaped as float. So they're typed arrays essentially in the JavaScript API, and that's what this is.
Can you do like 32-bit floating point math in JavaScript?
Not in JavaScript, but in WebAssembly.
Yeah, so you can always basically dole that out to WASM, I suppose.
Yeah, really the question was is this user convenience letting somebody talk about floats, but really it's being expanded or contracted to a double, or if there's ever a situation where there's a real float on the other side, and it sounds like there can be situations where there's a real float on the other side.
Yes, the web GPU is able to work with floats.
Fair enough.
There's also for like big int and stuff, I noticed on source.net there's JS marshaller type. Do we need that for float, or is that already there?
That's already there.
Okay, sorry, I just missed it.
You got me thinking. But yes, it should be there.
I actually don't see it
You don't see it.
on source.net. Like at least not with the name float. Is it single? Oh, it's
Single.
single. It's single. I see it. Yeah.
And we don't so one of the motivating scenarios given here is GPU and AI. WASM 2.0 doesn't have half precision floats today, but WebAssembly 3.0 is supposed to be getting them, and there's a speclet proposal for that. Are we waiting for 3.0 to be stable and that to be finalized before we would come back with the same set of APIs for half?
Probably yes. Yeah.
So looking at the JS marshaller argument type, I see we have like to JS of double and nullable double, but you're only doing it for the collection types here. Is that intentional?
Not really intentional. This is just mimicking the existing double landscape. Am I correct?
Well, like, so they're the non-collection versions. So
Yes.
to JS has, you know, double value and nullable double value, and then also the array.
And there is single question mark, single brackets.
Oh.
Mhm.
I see. Yeah, because it's called single, not float. Right. That makes it hard to find. Okay, so the scalar values. Thanks, Tanner. The scalar values are already there in conversion, but the collection values or the collections were not. So you're adding the collections.
Mhm.
Okay.
And views of collections or memory buffers.
Yep. I'm just making sure that we were getting it complete.
Thank you.
Okay. This is just overloads, and there seems to be a need for it. So this feels like easy yes from me. Anybody feel differently? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I didn't mark the last one, did I? Ah! I hate when things scroll. Alright, mark that one as approved. The video links are now going to say that we did this issue in like 2 seconds, but whatever. People are smart. Y'all can figure it out. Alright. Thank you, Pavel.
Thank you. I gotta go. See you later.
See ya. Alright. Tanner, let's see what of your things we can get through before you gotta go. So, more vector, sequence, and lane APIs, 122.557.
Yeah, so continuing along the premise of exposing some more cross-platform APIs covering common operations users need. There's a couple additional. We previously exposed create sequence, which allows you to specify the starting amount and the step amount. There's some other common sequence types that users end up needing. And while you can kind of roll your own for some of the fixed size vector types, doing it with vector of t, which is variable sized, really needs a built-in helper API for them. Similarly, there's a couple. We have the shuffle API for the fixed size vectors, but we don't have one for the variable size vector because you can't know how many indices you need to provide to specify how to shuffle. However, there are some special shuffle operations that are incredibly common that it is worth having helpers for, and which often have dedicated singular instructions available on platforms like WASM, ARM, and Intel. And so we're proposing create geometric sequence, create alternating sequence, harmonic sequence, and Cauchy sequence. These are all the kind of standard mathematical names for it. So geometric sequence being it's starting at the initial value and then multiplying the previous element by a given amount. So it's a form of exponentation almost. So if you start at 1, and then you multiply by 2, you're going to get 2, and then you're going to get 4 because you multiply the previous again by 2, 8, etc. Alternating sequence takes the two numbers and it alternates between them. So if you want 1, -1, which is a very frequent way to say, I want to have every even element do addition, but every odd element do subtraction. Or you just want to do, 0, 2, or 0 all bit set. It allows you to create that even odd pairing. Harmonic sequence is it is doing division. So you've got 1 divided by start, and then 1 divided by start plus step, and then 1 divided by start plus step times 2, etc. Cauchy sequence is very similar, but it's I plus start. And so it's effectively square root of create sequence. Again, all following the standard mathematical names. I figured the biggest controversy here might be people being unfamiliar with the mathematical terms for these sequences. But they are all very standard and very doable and common in various algorithms, especially when we're implementing trig functions for vectorization or various AI accelerators.
I'll admit I had to look up Cauchy. But they all seem legit.
If no one has feedback on those ones,
I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You mentioned that you're going to use constant expected for the geometric sequence to avoid expensive math pow.
Mhm.
I mean, what will happen if given a non-constant? Is that just take the slow path?
It will end up doing the computation. It will be correct, but it's potentially going to be incredibly expensive for the create if you pass in a non-constant.
Okay. All right.
So-
Yeah, that's
so-
what I would hope. Yeah. Okay.
So in general, constant expected for us isn't a you have to pass it in or this fails. It's a you should pass this in if you want perf. If you don't pass a constant in, it's on you if it's slow.
Makes sense.
The next set of APIs are the zip and unzip APIs. So what the different hardware calls these does vary a little bit. Some call it unpack, some calls it zip, some calls it interleave. The most common term and the term we use in LINQ itself is zip. And so it is just taking it's taking left and right, and it is interleaving the lower elements or interleaving the upper elements. So, it gives an example of you've got one that's 1 through 8, and you've got another vector that's 9 through 16. Well, zip lower is going to take the lower half of each of those and do 1, 9, 2, 10, 3, 11. So it's alternating whether it's picking from left or right and incrementing up until it fills the vector. And upper does the same thing, but starting halfway through the vector. And so both of them together give you the two new vectors that have been interleaved. And then unzip is the inverse operation of zip. Given left and right, it will give you back the ordered sequence of 1 through 8 and 9 through 16. Concat halves is a little bit interesting. For the cross-platform APIs, we've typically not used a magic selector or control mask like exists on many of the platform-specific APIs. However, in talking about this with various people in the community and other areas, we weren't able to come up with, well, one, we didn't want to expose, 8 different overloads called like concat lower, 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 upper, upper, lower, upper, upper, or anything like that. And users using intrinsics are typically familiar with control masks like this. So the most intuitive thing we were able to come up with was just call it concat halves. Take left and right, and then document that the control is, you've got a bit that is specifying whether you're taking the lower or upper from left, and then a bit that specifies whether you're taking the lower or upper from right, which allows the JIT to optimize it as expected without a lot of complexity, and for users to generally be able to understand how you're combining the lower and upper halves of two vectors.
We don't have any mathematical name for this, or this is the best we came up with.
It's concatenate. That's what it's doing. It's taking the two halves of the vectors that you specify in the selector, and it's concatenating them together.
Okay.
And then we don't actually use the word concatenate in the BCL. We use concat.
Thank
Mhm.
goodness we defied our design guidelines on that one.
I don't know how seriously I want to say this, but man, I really feel like this should just be concat LL, concat LU, concat UL, and concat UU.
I was kind of wondering about that too. Is like, should this be 4 methods? But yeah.
We that was discussed, and I figured API review would actually completely outright reject if I had brought this forward with the proposal of LU, LL, and stuff.
So really, this is next level. You're proposing what you don't want.
I proposed what I thought was the best option that balanced what API review would probably approve, what the users would understand, what the JIT could optimize.
You're like, no way they accept 4 methods up front, but if I present it as a single method, I might get there.
Yeah, I mean, those abbreviations are used in linear algebra.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's a little funny because the CRC proposal that I brought, I was like, I started with what we ended up with, but I'm like, no, it's gonna get rejected in API review, and then I changed it to the other thing, and then we changed it back.
I would not be against concat LL and stuff. I do actually think concat halves is a little bit more understandable to someone who's just reading it. Aside from the magic selector, it could be an enum if we wanted to come up with a name for the enum. And then you could, say lower, lower, half concat halves selector dot lower, 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 upper, upper, lower. There's a few different options that were discussed there.
I don't hate enum.
I mean, I like the enum better than pass a number 0 through 3.
Yeah.
Like
Even if you could put in the byte syntax.
intrinsics, people who use intrinsics are used to the notion that we didn't make an enum for something esoteric, but this is pulling it out of intrinsics and putting it in more approachable. So I really don't like the constant expected byte selector.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, like I kind of want to smack myself for it, but I kind of actually just like concat UU. So here.
Put a W in there, and then you've got concat uwu.
Why are we getting a wide upper half? Because for one, we only HALVE only appears one time in the framework. It is used as the verb. I agree that this is this plural spelling of half. But to return to a previous thing, thank you, Kevin. Staring at a word and it loses meaning is called semantic satiation.
Yep, I dropped that in our chat earlier. I should have said it, but that's exactly what I was thinking of.
HALVES doesn't look to me like the plural of half. It's like what are halves, and do they come in apricot flavor?
We also determined I learned semantic satiation from Ted Lasso. Good show if you haven't seen it.
Made by the guy who made Scrubs, which is coming back this year. Random things in my head.
You said Halves, and all I could think is Havel the Rock from Dark Souls.
Yeah, I feel like halva is a dessert of, I want to say Yiddish origin, but it could also just be bread. I don't know, like, anyway. So I feel that, well, this is the name for what it does. I don't know that it feels like the name for what it does.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could expand UU into concat upper, concat upper lower, etc. If, because someone like me should say we don't use just the capital U to mean upper, but
yeah. I think if we were to do 4, I would have, just for .NET consistency, a slight preference towards lower, 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 upper, upper, lower, upper, upper, just because it's less magic and we're less likely to regret it. If people really want the shorthand, we have static extension methods now.
Yep. All right, I will put that on screen so people can think.
Yeah, I think it matches like zip, right? We're not calling it zip L and zip U, so it is kind of repetitive, but hey.
Yeah. And then we can just document that it's specifying the one from left and the one from right.
Right, which is the only sensible thing to do, given how it's written on screen. But yes.
Chat asks, could we just have upper and lower as operators on vectors, so you could say left.upper concat right.lower? I feel like the answer is no.
So we have get lower, get upper already. However, the problem with that is that you do not have a lower and upper that you can get for a vector of t, because you don't know its size. So unlike vector 128, you can't just go and get a vector 64. The other issue is that while you can get the lower half of a vector 128, you typically do not want to, because a lot of hardware does not actually provide a vector 64 and it's not hardware accelerated. So you really want the ability to say, given this vector, and without introducing a temporary new vector that has the upper half zeroed or vice versa, do the operation.
Does like NumPy do that or something? Are other languages able to like kind of elide the intermediate registers and all that?
It depends on what type of operation you're doing. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where when you're in perf critical code, you typically don't want to rely too much on magic optimizations.
Yeah, I was thinking we'd need a half vector type to talk about the half vector.
And then that would be non-hardware.
So are you saying that
acceleration
if a
issue.
YMM register is present, the XMM register is fake?
No, well, kind of. But what I'm more saying is that, so Vector 128 is the common base type that all hardware kind of provides. Vector 64, which is half of a Vector 128, not all hardware provides. ARM provides it, but x86 does not. And so while you kind of
Oh, 'cause-
have 128 as a guaranteed base, and if you have 256, you likely have 128. It's not strictly guaranteed. There's also some scenarios like ARM SVE, where with SVE, you could have, for example, a 512-bit vector, and you could say, I'm compiling only for hardware that has 512-bit for the variable length vector. And so you've got 512-bit, and you've got 128-bit via Neon, but there's no 256-bit because there's no actual hardware for it because of that variable length.
Yep.
So you end up in that weird scenario where there's no actual guarantee you have an intermediate, smaller sized vector.
Fair enough. Somebody asked, would there ever be a lower? I mean, it doesn't really make sense because it would be thirds at that point, and I don't think we can guarantee a third of a vector.
Yeah, once you start getting into thirds or fourths or anything like that, you want to use shuffle or some other combination of sequence like zip and unzip followed by a concat or something else. You don't have any kind of dedicated hardware otherwise.
Yeah.
These are really just special optimizations for the very common need of I'm doing a shuffle of a very specific shape.
Mm-hmm. And remind me what the intrinsic attribute is on all these. Is that saying the JIT's expected to fold it to a single instruction?
Right. It's saying that the JIT supports it specially and provides the accelerated implementation if it can.
Okay. So all of these should also be marked. So
the intrinsic's actually an internal attribute. It's not public API, so it doesn't really matter.
Fair enough.
Should we steelman the enum thing, or are we pretty confident we won't like it? So it'd be like concat halves left right, and then it would be like vector half selector dot lower something like that.
Yeah.
I think the thing that pushed away from that was people reading halves and being like, this word doesn't look right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. I'm okay with the four methods. Good veteran move on the proposal.
Yeah. All right. So sounds like we're in agreement of 4 methods.
Yeah.
Which really pushes constant expected as call the method you want.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody needs the dynamic, then they get to write their own switch table.
The last one in this group is reverse, which works just like array reverse. If you have 0, 1, 2, 3, it becomes 3, 2, 1, 0. So it just reverses the sequence. And then as an actual property, we have sign sequence, which is, like I described earlier, one of the most common cases for alternating sequence is you have a sign sequence. So you effectively just want to take +1, -1. And so it's a very specific optimization of the common need for that and gives it as a well-defined member.
Do we need
Much-
to distinguish between the sign sequence that starts positive and the sign sequence that starts negative?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Users can always do negative sign sequence to get the inverse one. And in my experience, sign sequences tend to start with +1 and then alternate to -1 rather than the inverse.
Fair enough. Just whoever last edited this sentence in the Wikipedia article says one example is the sequence 1, -1. It's like, yeah, there's another example.
There's exactly 2 examples.
So okay. Really, I was just looking of were we inventing a term or is that a standard term? And it does seem to be standard. Yeah, and presumably if this is something that we can vector load better than or that we can vector load awesomely better than calling alternating sequence.
Yeah, it
That-
makes it a little bit cheaper for the JIT to handle for the super common case.
Yeah, that if we need the inverse or negative sign sequence, that we could add it later if somebody demonstrates a need.
Yeah.
Assuming it has enough of a use and enough of an optimization. All right, and then I'm gonna pattern match and say we're then gonna do all of this again, but with numbers.
Yep, it's the same set, but for the other 4 vector types, the fixed size ones. Since we're trying to keep parity between the surface areas.
Okay, and then going back to, do we need the half concats?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, XMM I think is 128. So when I asked if is XMM fake, I'm sure you laughed at me. The fact that we don't want people to have to drop to the lower type means you think it is still useful for the numbered types to just talk about here 2 YMM registers, glue them together, and don't ever
Right.
make me talk about an XMM.
Right. We do actually have we do have vector 128 create that takes in 2 vector 64s. For if you have vector 64s and you want to do that. And the concats are about I have vector 128s and don't want to change out from my known acceleration path.
Fair enough.
And then I guess the other thing worth noting, just for clarity, is unlike the platform-specific intrinsics where I always end up saying the API proposal says it's generic, but it's not really generic, we're exploding it out. The cross-platform APIs say they're generic and they will be generic. So this isn't exploded by, a factor of 10. It's exactly these generic APIs being defined and exposed.
Why does VS Code not support replace and selection? Yep. All right. Is there anything else in this one, or just the part where I copy the splat several times?
No, should just be copy the splat.
One day we're gonna have vector 1024, and we're gonna be annoyed at the amount of API we have to add.
Hopefully not. I'm a little bit doubtful of larger than 512 being exposed because at that point you're just better off using a GPU.
Don't you think it would just be a GPU type? Okay.
Yeah, what's the limit for GPUs as far as like register width?
Well, GPUs don't really use SIMD so much as they use SIMT. And so they mostly work with entire arrays of scalars based on the number of ALUs they have.
I guess that makes, yeah,
Yeah, so they don't really provide anything over a vector 128 anyways, because they do
I
have
see.
specialized support for Vec4. That's a little bit of a different concept.
All right. So I think that's the only thing we changed. Though while we were discussing this word, someone pointed out that it is more commonly pronounced Koshi than Cauchy, though Cauchy is apparently an acceptable pronunciation if you're British. Just FYI. All right. Yeah, so the only other thing that I had, and I'll say it just so we can decide we don't care, is for alternating sequence, instead of first and second, do we want to say even and odd? I don't care.
I would be fine with even and odd. And it would match how we use even and odd in other APIs like unzip even.
All right, so
Wait, where are we suggesting using even and odd in replace of alternating?
now create
Oh.
alternating sequence currently takes first and second, and so that it would be create
Oh, just
alternating
the parameter
sequence even
names.
and odd. Yeah.
Got it. Got it.
It's the 3 lines and the search pop-up next to close. Oh. All right. Thank you for that. Someone told me how to do a replace and selection. Okay, so we also create alternating sequence first, second becomes even odd. Yes, even odd. First, second did avoid thinking. But okay, so assume whether or not I, assuming that I get this correct, and if I don't, you'll know how to fix it. I think that finishes this issue, unless anybody else has anything else they want to talk about. Okay, that was probably the only hits of first and second, so I could have just done a bulk replace, but it was small enough. All right. I'm leaving the intrinsics in because editing them out is a pain in the butt. Probably the same reason you left them in. And, all right. That covers that one. We have another intrinsics, but if you have to go, you have to go.
I have enough time for the other intrinsics one. It should be straightforward.
Okay.
And if not, I'll drop.
All right. 512 BMM 123898.
Yeah, so AMD has introduced the bit matrix multiply intrinsics. There's just 3 total new APIs, which expanded across the types that need to be supported. And so they've got reverse bits, which reverses the 8 bits within each byte within a vector. Reverse bits was the obvious name for that, in my opinion. And then they've got 2 instructions that do bit matrix multiplication. And if you scroll down a little bit, I actually gave a walkthrough of how bit matrix multiplication works. But functionally, it follows the standard algorithm for multiplication, but then because it's bitwise, there's some optimizations that the hardware ends up doing. So because you're just doing bit multiplication, you only have a couple of answers, and so you can only end up producing 0 or 1 as a result. So the actual multiplication gets optimized to a bitwise AND. Then you have the concept of when you're doing a matrix multiply, you end up summing into the destination as you're doing the progression. And so bit matrix multiply ends up having excuse me, the ability to do either an OR reduction or an XOR reduction, which is basically describing whether it's doing a summation, subtraction type operation as it's doing computation. But the actual important information as far as the operation goes is it's doing it with an OR reduction and XOR reduction, and so that's what the name is describing. And so the proposed name is bit multiply matrix 16 by 16 with OR reduction, and bit multiply matrix 16 by 16 with XOR reduction.
And I mean, I saw that the original proposal, including the API usage, it has a third times 16, which does look kind of ridiculous, but it makes sense considering the example code has 3 loops. So what's the justification for making it 16 by 16? The inner loop is like part of the reduction or something?
Well, so you end up doing 3 loops for any kind of matrix multiplication because you end up having like, so if you have a 4x4 and you're multiplying by another 4x4, you still have 3 loops effectively, because you end up having to do the multiplication all the ways and doing the summation, and so you end up doing the 3. And so there, it's not a 16 by 16 by 16. The concept is you're taking a 16 by 16 matrix and multiplying it by another 16 by 16 matrix.
Man, I'm trying to it's been a long time since linear algebra when I had to do matrix multiplications. Is it really that many operations? It's n cubed?
Yep.
Isn't okay.
Yep, it's that many.
Right.
And SIMD allows you to simplify it down a lot because you're able to do 4 at a time.
All right.
So why does it take 3 inputs?
Because you have to specify what the destination base value is. So assuming that you're just doing a basic multiplication, right? You would end up saying matrix 4x4 destination equals 0. And then you would end up saying left times right, and then as you're looping through, add that to the result. However, there may be cases where you want to have a different baseline value other than 0, and the hardware allows you to specify that.
So this is x times y with or reduction plus z?
Effectively, yeah.
Okay. It is. These are intrinsic, so we can hold our nose on the names, but is there a way that we can convey that these two are multiplied and this one's added or base or something like that?
We could potentially use left, right, and normally we would use left, right, and add it. However, this is doing an OR reduction, which is effectively the same as XOR reduction is effectively the same as addition. Whereas OR reduction is a different operation that effectively, it's more like a saturation. And because you're describing it as OR versus XOR, the term add-in doesn't really make sense. We can't use base because it's we can't use base because that's a reserved keyword.
We can
I
call
wasn't
it.
able to think of.
We can call it at base. People see it as base, and then we just. No one's ever going to talk about the variable, so it's not going to screw up the callers.
That's fair.
I don't know what named variable syntax or named parameter syntax does there. I think it won't get upset because the context would say base shouldn't be a keyword there, but Jared may have missed that case. So you might have to say at base : your thing. I mean, if you think that the docs want to just say that it's X pile of symbols Y plus Z, then we can. But it's helping people understand, especially if the input order is non-obvious, which is often the case in hardware. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like X times Z plus Y, because why not?
I'm just trying to think if like left and right are the obvious for multiply. Just trying to think if there's something else we could use other than base for Z, or for the addend rather. What is functionally the addend? I mean, we could call it the addend and then just document that OR reduction is effectively a saturating add and XOR reduction is effectively a regular add.
So 16, it refers to the matrix itself, to the X and Y, right? I mean,
yeah. So you've got U short, which is 16 bits, and in a vector 256, you have 16 U short, so it's 16 by 16.
Yeah, I'm asking because, like, should we call it like X16, Y16? So it will be obvious those what we are multiplying, and Z will be whatever we're adding there. Yeah.
Well, so this isn't doing 16 times. That's not 16 times 16. That's describing a 16 by 16 matrix. So it's a two-dimensional value.
Okay.
It's much like we've got matrix 4x4, because it describes that it has 4 rows and 4 columns.
So sorry, and this is probably dumb too, but why shouldn't vector 512 and vector 256, given that they're both U shorts, have a different matrix size?
No, so vector 512 it's not treating the input as a as a 16 by 32. It's treating it as two 16 by 16s.
Okay. So basically, you're getting 2 for the price of 1, kind of, with the vector 512, which makes sense. That's what all of this often is.
Unless we have precedent elsewhere, reverse bits of X seemed like values was a better name.
Yep.
So yes, if we want to call it base, it would be at base. Other suggestions have been seed or starting. You said addend.
Mm-hmm.
So any of them are good, but especially when we have things that are, this is gluing together the multiply thing, and also you can add stuff to it. Feels like and this is the add stuff should be named separately.
Yeah. I feel like addend is the most sensible given how matrix multiplication works. And given that the OR reduction and XOR reduction is talking about how the hardware is optimizing what is functionally an add and a saturating add.
All right. So left, right, and addend.
Yeah, and if it happens to be addend left, right, and I got that wrong from the docs, then
we'll fix it.
I'll just swap the order.
Yeah, I mean, you clearly need to match the processor order, since that's the purpose. I mean, I guess the JIT can do whatever it wants, but I feel like we want people, if they're writing a function that has them in the right order, we want them to be able to stick with vector alignment.
Yeah, otherwise we end up having to deal with what if one of the inputs is a side effect and then we have to extract the side effect, swap the operands internally, and it becomes expensive, so we want to try and match. I just don't happen to have this doc open in front of me, so I can't remember whether add-end is the first parameter or the last. It's one of those two, though.
Okay. That gives us that. So with the note of assuming add-end is last, and if it's not, fix it. Happy?
Yep, looks good to me.
Comment. Splat. All right. Thank you, Tanner.
Yep, and I do have to run now, so sorry I can't stick around for any others.
No worries. All right. Because for Adams, we wanted to wait for Mr. Tobe, who couldn't be with us today. This means we're now to anybody can shout one out as long as you feel that you have your reviewers in the room.
I'm not opposed to us starting the conversation on the stream wrappers. I know Mr. Tobe has opinions on the extension members approach, but what do you think, Faye? Shall we get it started today and see what feedback we hear here?
Do we need a Steven, Jeff, or not?
Yeah, I don't. So I think the idea is we can't get to approved here, but if we have nothing else that anybody wants to talk about, we can start the. I'll say discussion as to the contentious
Yeah.
point.
What is the so basically the extension member usage? Because I mean, this seems like
Yes.
it's gonna make typical like memory stream reset to 0 code simpler, kind of.
Yeah.
Just the goal.
Vivi, we couldn't hear you when you came off mute before. You want to try again? Still can't hear you for some reason.
Heard that.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't because what's that at the beginning? I wasn't ready to present, I guess. But yeah, we can discuss it. Although
Yeah, I mean,
my open questions.
since we won't be able
my
to say
open
yes
questions for
today,
this-
maybe I'll just say the contentious point on this proposal is this block here of how do we feel about adding static extension members into the BCL? Do we ever want to do it? If so, do we want to do it now? And if we do it now, is this the right place to introduce the usage of it?
Yes, that's the main discussion point, and also, I guess, naming. Just to check if. Well, no, yeah, that's the main discussion point because the other open question I added was in relation on that choice. Because right now the proposal have, well, it has the naming consistency, but whether on we decide or not to go with this, the other alternative have naming that might not be as symmetric. So yeah.
Can you explain first, Amal, like why we need this extension method in the first place, and we go from there.
Okay, so should I present them? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this issue started like from the beginning. This issue is a proposal for adding standardized stream wrappers to the VCL for command in-memory types like stream, the types you can see here like stream, read-only memory of byte, and read-only sequence of byte. This was discussed previously in API review. So just as a brief recap of the context, this came up to life because nowadays developers command fallback for grabbing these types on a stream involves allocating, copying, custom stream grabbers done on their own, relying on external packages like Community Toolkit, High Performance, and NerdBank Stream. This is something that was commonly discussed in forums like Stack Overflow and requested through a bunch of GitHub issues. To your question, Tarek, this specific type, for example, I bundled one of the main issues of the reason why this one was considered, but it is also this specific type was requested on at least two different issues too. Getting a lot of interactions and votes and reactions. Even the runtime itself already has an internal implementation, for example, of a read-only memory stream in multiple places, like terabyte. So, suggesting that this is a recurring platform level need too. So that's the goal of, as mentioned before, the goal of today is to provide like a standardized built-in way of doing it and creating some sort of precedent on the matter, as Jeff said, like start talking about this. So this, as mentioned before, this was previously discussed in API review in March 2023, and the review board's feedback on this was first not to do it as a factory, like on a different assembly, because of the sacrifices on discoverability, usability, and consistency for implementation flexibility. Also to investigate adding a constructor overload to memory stream for the byte data cases, which David already investigated, showing non-trivial performance trade-offs. So that was discarded because of that. Also, to defer, one of the conclusions on the API review was to defer the read-only sequence of byte type until static extensions exist, which has been shipped in .NET 10. That's why now it's been, now the proposal includes it like that. And also another conclusion was to separate read-only from gradable naming, which led to the naming of what you see on today's proposal. So yeah, given all these, the questions still are, now that the C# 14 extension members are a thing, how to actually surface the API? Should we use them for read-only sequence, or should we stick to the classic extension methods? And as I said way earlier, if the classic extension method is preferred, is the naming asymmetry shown in one of the alternative designs, I think it's the alternative design one, acceptable? Basically, I want to confirm location and naming. A couple of options were considered.
Vivi, can you pause for a minute? Eric, you've had a hand up for a while.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, when we get to it, my question is just, why don't we consider pushing read-only sequence down if we need stream to work with it? And there's other, we've pushed other types from system memory down into system runtime and core lib. So yeah, whenever is the appropriate time to consider that question, then we can.
Yes, actually, I was gonna just talk about that. That was one of the options discussed, and is one of the alternative designs. I think alternative design 3. That is moving it to core lib for having it also in. Maybe I forgot to mention and to clarify, but for the corelib types, well, no. Let me first mention real quick the couple of options considered, and then this proposal. So one of the options considered was indeed the factory method and the different assembly, already discarded. Another was doing a stream as classic extension methods for all the types. Kind of discarded due to the limitation of extending object / extending a string based on guidelines. And as you'll see among the alternative API designs, indeed, one of the options was moving read-only sequence type to private corelib for being able to consistently add it to a stream, as you see here in the proposal for the other types, the corelib types. And another option considered was placing all the factory methods, in a stream factory class, but in system memory DLL, which was suggested by Adam, I think, keeping it in the shared framework. That will help resolve also a layering issue problem here, and I guess broader targeting frameworks. So yeah, each option has pros and cons that I would like to discuss here. All of
so-
this leading to
So a lot of that, I think we don't have the people in the room to discuss. So I think the only thing that we can really be discussing today is how we feel about static extension methods.
Yes, I also am kind of interested in more details about how from writable data works. Like I was trying to read the proposal. Like, can you still read from it if, it starts with data and you start at the beginning position? What happens when you hit the end? I suppose like writing throws, but I don't know, maybe that doesn't need to be there. But yeah, as far as the extension method goes, since I'm talking, like I agree with Eric that we should probably push read-only sequence down to system private corelib or whatever.
Yeah.
yeah, if you could please, Jeremy, move it to like maybe show the alternative design tree just to see the pros and cons of that one. Yeah, so oh no, is it? No, I said 2, sorry. Yeah. So I guess that wasn't my main choice. Because it's like I guess it's good for consistency and I guess discoverability because it's close to stream. But the cons there are the implications of moving the type to corelib. I don't know, like it's again, like I'm open to discuss it, of course. But one of the cons I saw was I was like a lot of a change for the single API scenario. And also the ability to target all older targets. Basically limitations of corelib to target
Does it-
spike.
So Eric, does moving read-only sequence to corelib will break the older targets?
The what targets? Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Yeah.
Older targets. I mean, down levels. I mean, it's
No.
It would
No, we type
because-
forward.
it would freeze their API. Read-only sequence would never gain new API on older frameworks.
It never does. Sorry, no, it can't already. So it's part of system memory. So it that's already frozen.
Fair enough.
So it has no implications to older frameworks.
Okay, so the second point in the cons is not true.
Yeah. Really, the only reason why I would balk at pushing it down is if its type closure was too large, that it would bloat corelib a lot or require us to do runtime light up for things that we didn't want to push down, but read-only sequence needed. So we need to do some evaluation of, hey, when you pull on this thread to move this thing down, what else needs to come with it? And does any of that make us have pause? But I don't quite know why we didn't pull these ones down originally, so we'd probably want to go and look at whatever the reasoning was there and see if it was just an abundance of caution or if there were real engineering reasons that made us choose not, to pull down some of system memory, but not all. I suspect that it was just being conservative or even timing that made it not go down to core lib. Like maybe the JIT didn't need to know about it. And so we had, at the time, we had purity ideas. We were still doing partial facades at the time. So we were like, well, anything that doesn't need to be in core lib should not be in core lib. So let's keep it in a partial facade. But we've kind of given up on linking has made a lot of those things, a lot of those concerns moot. And so I would really lean towards, if the only things holding us back are implementation concerns, then I would lean on the better API, make the better API rather than have the extension method, the extra machinery to do this. Because if we have one case now where we want to use this type as an exchange type read-only sequence, then maybe in the future we'll have more cases where we want to use this type as an exchange type with other core VCL types. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on the preview API review, this was briefly discussed, and it was mentioned that it was just because there was never any, as you said. There,
So, Eric, is there a concern? I know there's a few concerns with moving the type regarding, like, I don't know if it's this assembly size of system per core lib or if it's the amount of complexity that it incurs in moving it to all the other types that we already have. Will that play a role here, or?
Yeah, that's what I just mentioned. Like you have to move its type closure. So if any of those other types would give us pause, because I can't anticipate the reasons. I don't imagine there's any, given how low level this type is. But if we looked at something and said, well, oh shoot, that thing,
Okay.
it needs to live higher in the stack because its dependencies have to live higher in the stack. Because reasons, like I don't know what the reasons are, but it could be, I can't think of any. Like I did a brief scan of what was there and I didn't see anything that stood out. But like an example of this a while ago was like we didn't want to move type converters in because we didn't want to move all of the component model in. And I mean, this wasn't moving into core lib, this was even moving into the framework. And so we did extra gymnastics to avoid that. But since then we've changed that perspective. So yeah, it's tough to know what we would see that would, I can't think of anything right now.
Yeah, and when it comes to the idea of using the static extension members, so there's a question in chat of if the whole purpose of the thing was supposed to be backwards compatible, why isn't it backwards compatible? It's instance extension members declared with extension syntax are probably compatible, but the static extensions, this method outputs only with what the compiler people call an unspeakable name. There's no syntax that you can use to call it that is not stream.from read-only data. So most or all of our current extension methods you can call as a static method on the type that defines them. The static extension methods have no such call pattern, which is unusual. Given that we have guidelines that say don't extend types you don't own, own is a complicated term, but this means that this sort of pattern, if some other assembly came up with a type like read-only sequence, we would tell them they should not have added an extension method on stream. If we would tell them they shouldn't add extension methods on stream, we shouldn't add extension methods on stream. So my personal opinion is we should never allow static extensions except in cases like generic math where we needed them.
Yeah. Another place where it's compatible but less functional is at runtime, right? The compiler knows how to resolve extension methods just fine, but runtime binding does not. So if someone builds some sort of runtime extensibility system that can like light up on extension method, or on static methods, and it won't see those if it's not plumbed extension methods. So there's a degradation of capabilities when we choose these. I would say like we'd have to see a case where it warrants it. Like if the layering concern was strong enough that we didn't want to change the layering of a type, or we couldn't, then I could see that being justification for adding extension statics or extension constructors over the placing them on the more natural type. But we'd need to see that case.
Yeah.
I guess something that was in the framework versus out of the framework, right?
Yeah, and like I mean, there is the but we do own Stream, so we're closing off, or we're completing the feature. But again, the fact that this is not a user, according to our current guidelines, this is not a user repeatable pattern, means that I think that we should shy away from it in general.
Yeah. Well, the pros and cons that Vivi called out, those would definitely apply if we were doing this on, like, if we had a movable component, right, that we didn't want to push in the framework, like something that was still experimental. I could see us building extension statics in that rather than pushing them down. So I suspect we will come up with cases, but I wouldn't want to predict them.
Because the user extensible pattern problem is, since static extensions can only be called via static syntax off of the extended type, if we then put a method in the way of someone else's extension, their method now becomes literally uncallable. Like the type, or the member being on the type wins over all extensions. Yeah. So we would now have this, if we think it's okay for people to start extending our types, we now have are we concerned with stomping on their name? Now, if they're doing it for a type, like you've added read-only sequence as an OOB, you're doing an extension that would allow read-only sequence, the only way that we could have pulled down a conflicting member on that case would be if we pulled down read-only sequence. So maybe that would be the nuance, but it gets very complicated.
Even if it was noob, I don't think it's okay. Just because, what if another dependency needs it?
I would say, like, if we feel that we can't move read-only stream, my preference is read-only sequence. My preference is that read-only sequence gets treated as a second-class citizen, which is what it is if it's not being moved into CoreLib, and it has to use an instance as stream, even though the other things get statics off of stream, because this is a user extensible pattern.
But I think Eric's right that we can move it into CoreLib, and we should.
Yeah, that's my preference. I was really trying to speculate about the extensions things, and I'm hedging my bets because I won't. I won't
right, like if we turn out to be wrong, we're wrong. But like I'm hopeful that we can move it.
I hadn't thought nearly as deep about it as Jeremy had, but yeah, I agree that's gnarly.
I will admit I've had conversations with them already. This was already in my head.
Okay. Will we assume that the moving down it's doable and just continue with the discussion for the proposal?
Sure. I mean, like I said, we can't. I don't think we have the people to get to yes today, so but we can get people's early opinions and talk about some other aspects.
Right.
So, what piece would you like to talk about?
Bibi, do you have any in specific that you want to discuss here? Maybe in the open questions or the notes,
Um,
or do you want to
I guess
do you want to discuss another design, the alternative designs as well? Not
So
the
one
ones-
thing aside from the extension method thing, which I kind of brought up in passing earlier because the extension method conversation was interesting, is I see one of the alternative design proposals has writable as a Boolean option for writable data, but it doesn't seem, it's like alternative design 3 discussed all that much. Yeah, if we could just be like a little more crisp on, is the writable stream also readable, and like, do we want a mode to make it non-readable? My assumption is that it is readable, and there's no option, and that's fine. But I think it's worth clarifying that.
just to clarify, your question is if the from writable data is readable?
Yeah,
Sorry.
basically, and what that writable option on alternative design 3, if you can scroll down, Jeremy, just like what that was like intending to control.
I feel like memory stream, if you give it an array, it's readable and writable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it
I think
would
that's
be-
fine. Yeah, and all the other proposals don't have the writable thing. So if the answer is that it is readable and writable, and it starts at position 0, and there's no option, that's fine. But maybe just making that a little more clear.
Yeah, I guess the difference was made there because all of the other are read only. This is the only one that will be readable. That's why. But yeah, that makes sense. Your question makes sense. Tarek has another question.
Yeah, I have a quick question regarding the encoding. So you are passing the encoding for this. What the encoding means exactly if you are passing text? A string is always UTF-16. So what this means encoding here?
So yeah, you're passing which type of encoding you will use
Is
right now.
Stream
Boolean
is
my default thing.
stream is bytes, Tarek. So
Yeah.
stream dot from
Uh-huh.
No, but that's
text.
a good point. No, yeah, it's interesting. Like,
Correct.
it could transcode in theory. But yeah, the same is true for read-only memory of car, right? Like in theory, that's all UTF-16. Unless you're saying it's not. Some people do use
The input's
cars,
16,
cars.
but it's if you want a stream representing the ASCII 7 or UTF-8 or whatever of your data,
ASCII,
if you
yeah,
want the stream.read
obviously.
to give you back ASCII bytes, then
Yeah.
you need to pass the ASCII encoding.
Oh, that totally makes sense.
Okay. So this is actually the stream encoding, not the text encoding.
Yeah, it's what
Right.
this text
Well,
plus
okay.
this encoding equals the bytes in this stream.
Okay.
No, that makes sense. I was confused as well.
Yeah, it's not what's the encoding of the text. It's what transcoding happens as you're writing it out to the stream. Or sorry, as when someone reads from the stream, which encoding of the text did they read? Feel free to pass code page 962. That's probably a legal number.
Someone proposed in the comments like a separate method for UTF-8, just because that's going to be so common, like going from UTF-16, yeah, obviously in memory representation to UTF-8 for serializing.
Yeah.
Okay.
do-
So, sorry, go ahead.
We do default to UTF-8 though.
No,
Yeah.
actually, null defaults to UTF-8.
Yeah, that's what the stream
Interesting.
layer does.
Yeah, this is the
Okay.
stream. Yeah, which
I
makes
mean,
sense.
I kind of like it. I'm surprised. I would have not necessarily expected that. But it is probably what most people are going to want.
Yeah. I think we did that because like we are reading, I mean, the stream most of the time representing underlying files, and we want to read the files as UTF-8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's right. Like,
Okay.
it's interesting though. It's not a decision we would have made if this was an API introduced in like, you know, .NET 3.5 or something,
Yeah, I
probably.
mean-
But
Again, when we get to the point where we're willing to say yes, and somebody says the default encoding is UTF-8, and somebody goes, "What?" Then the suggestion is probably going to be, then it has no default. Make someone pass it, and in 10 years we'll
Okay.
get around to deciding that we can accept null as a BUTF-8. So,
but I want it though. My reaction was what? But I like it. But yeah, it was a little surprising.
yeah.
So my other question regarding the like from read-only data and writable data. So this takes like whatever memory of bytes or sequence of bytes. Should also this take the encoding for these bytes? And it takes also encoding of the stream?
But bytes are already bytes.
No,
Yeah.
because that's just for text to bytes, like string to bytes.
Yeah, I do see the use case, but of like maybe wanting to re-encode, but I think that should be a separate thing rather than a parameter.
Yeah, like if you're talking about the places where I lost an argument 10 years ago and we didn't introduce char 8, so we use read-only span of byte to mean UTF-8 text, I think that would be an overload of from text, which is where you then would expect an encoding. So you'd say a read-only span or read-only memory, I guess, of byte UTF-8 text or text UTF-8. I don't remember where we stick those letters. And then what encoding would you like the bytes to be when they're done? And clearly you would pass an encoding there, because if you wanted it to be UTF-8, you would just say it's already UTF-8 data. So
Yeah,
No,
actually,
I mean, my scenario is like, you know, I have UTF-8 bytes, for example.
Yeah.
And I want to stream operate as UTF-16.
right, and that would be
Right.
an overload of from text, not an overload of from read-only data, because from read-only data is about bytes.
Right. It doesn't matter. I mean, like, I'm not talking about overloads. I mean, I'm talking about the scenario. I mean, like, we
Yeah.
need to support.
we could. Like, yeah, do we need to support in one method? But yeah, as an overload of from text, I don't mind it. I think it's pretty clear what it would do.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it is overload from text, it will take like span of byte or whatever memory
Right,
of byte.
read only
Yeah,
memory
read-only,
byte or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, ROM byte.
We always assume the span of bytes like UTF-8 all the time.
well here, well in a lot of places we
Yeah,
do.
like, so
anywhere we take it as text we do.
This
Like,
is-
anytime we
yeah, this is the argument I tried making years ago, that we should introduce char 8 as a type that at runtime is the same as byte. I don't care. Honestly, I would have done it as enum char 8 : byte. And then it would just be, don't let the type system confuse them. But it would be something like, that's funny. I'll fix that in a moment. That's an 8, not a 7. So it would look something like that.
there's like an even more generic API where you have like input encoding, output encoding. But I think you're right that the 99% case would be UTF-8 in memory.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And you can't always just do this as like multiple encoding operations. Of course, we want to make things easy.
Yeah, I would rename encoding to stream encoding is to be very obvious.
That's a good point.
Sure.
But yeah, like even in the existing from text, it's probably worth that. That might be a good note. Putting stream encoding in there, like it should be obvious that the input encoding is UTF-16, but like we got tripped up by that, or I mean, I did. Whatever. So why not just be extra clear?
Phoebe, do you have more questions regarding the naming or anything else? Or are we at time and we just let's say like let's just stop for now because of that?
I need to drop
Continue.
anyway. So
Okay.
Okay, so for the next session then, or
So again, while you're showing up at the top of the list, that's because you're on a thing from 3 years ago. But really you're 4 days ago, so you're down here. It'll show up on an agenda at some point, or just if you hang out, sometimes we finish the agenda early and then we talk about whatever people are here to represent. But I would not expect it for next time. Next time will be Deflate and Anonymous Pipes and probably Tar. And that's probably all we're going to have time for.
except if it is blocking, you can mark it blocking, right?
You can mark it blocking, and then I'm going to ask you why it's blocking,
it's
and you're
not
going to say because you want to talk about it, and I'm going to say take that up with Iram of why their proposal has been delayed yet again. So,
Sounds good.
If it is blocking and you have a reason why it's blocking, then yes, but I don't think it is.
oh yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so we thought maybe stream encoding instead of encoding for the partner name. All right, so those are the preliminary notes, and we'll talk about this for real at some other time, which probably isn't next week, but I also told you at the beginning of this meeting that we wouldn't talk about it today, and we did, so who knows. All right.
Yeah, I'll be ready.
Well, that was, I'll say that was as lively a discussion as I expected on the, actually, it wasn't, it was pretty one-sided. But yeah, I was skeptical of static extensions, and it seems like a lot of us are on board with that same skepticism.
I mean, I know how much you like order procedure and stuff, but this is like a perfect test case for your ban on extension methods, because the alternative wasn't like give up the API. It was like pretty reasonable.
Yep.
Maybe if it's an API we want more or don't have an easy workaround for.
Yeah,
people
we
argue
have
for it.
already added static extension methods, or sorry, static extension members, and it was things like
that we know.
Vector 128, it was something with generic math. But it only applied when the T was a floating point type. So it was extend like I number when T is I floating point, to then add some floating point constants. And that was like literally the only way we could do it. And so it was like, yep, this is fine.
And to your point,
Yeah.
Stefan, that's exactly why we presented it the way we did here today, so that we could have this test case. So I appreciate that we talked through it.
Yes,
Alright.
thank you.
So yes, because we were only preliming it, I'm not really going to mark. I'm not going to change it off of ready for review, so it won't show up in the minutes. Actually, no, I'm going to mark it as needs work so it gets a video link. I changed my mind. And then I'll pop it back to ready for review as soon as I post the minutes. So you don't need to track it.
At the
change
bottom of the list for its milestone. Yeah, but you could always bump it.
Yeah. Yeah. It. Yeah. Yeah. It'll turn up on the agenda when it does.
Blocking. Yeah, exactly. We can do whatever we need to.
All right.
All right.
Well, thanks everyone who joined us online. Had some good input, particularly around the debate of how do you spell multi-threaded, and also other things, but that one stuck out in my brain. And we'll see you next Tuesday, same .NET time, same .NET channel. And for anybody who comes here via an invitation via Teams, a new series starts next week. So just pay attention to that. All right. Until then, Auf Wiedersehen.